There's a double standard expressed both on the right and the left, although in opposite directions. So on the right, as a waiter said to me in Marseille or near Marseille relatively recently, yeah, when France plays Senegal, haha, it's all Africans. Like these players aren't really French. At the same time as that when a French player decides to go play for Morocco or Senegal or wherever it might be, they go, what? You're abandoning the country that raised you? How dare you? But then, on the left or the kind of progressive liberals, there's kind of the same thing as well, where they go, well, no, everybody who's here is French and they're absolutely French. Don't listen to what the racists say. Oh, everyone's welcome here who wants to be French or whatever metropolitan country we might be talking about. And then when like France wins, they go, well, did you know these are all Africans? This is actually a really good point. This is a win for Africans. So, kind of undermining their own argument. So there's double standards on both sides. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm sure the question that's been on your mind for the past month is, where's the fucking BungaCast episode on the World Cup? Well, here it is. Welcome back to the Global Politics Podcast at the end of history, and we're on to the very serious business of the World Cup. We're recording this on Monday, the 13th of July, in this quite uncomfortable and sober lull between the quarters and semifinals of the World Cup. It was a global politics lull as well until Trump decided to honor the recently deceased foreign policy hawk Lindsey Graham with a memorial attack on Iran. But we're not going to consider that right now because we, as I said, have much more important business to attend to, and I have many guests to introduce. So let's get on with that straight away. You will have heard all these people's voices on the podcast before, and if you're following along on video, you can actually put a face to the name. But let's get through it, and also I will have to make obligatory mention of where they're from and who they're supporting in the World Cup. So firstly, Juan David Rojas, who is Colombian and a columnist at Unheard, and indeed will have been supporting Colombia at the World Cup until their exit. So actually, Juan, hi, who are you supporting now?
I just want to see some good football. I was for Norway, but now honestly. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like seeing Messi play, but Argentina already won. France already won. They're also just insane. England's pretty good too. Spain's good. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a preference.
Strangely non-committal, which makes me suspicious that there's something more untoward going on. But we'll discover that as we go through this. We have Euan Marshall, São Paulo-based journalist and South America football commentator. You can hear him on the English feed of the Libertadores and Copa Sudamericana games. So if you would like to hear what he sounds like when he's doing commentator voice, you can go check that out. Hi, Euan. Now that Scotland is departed from the World Cup, feels like it's ages ago, years ago that Scotland were in the World Cup. Who are you supporting now?
Well, as a Scotland fan, the second team of all Scotsmen is anyone who's playing England, and who am I to go against that long cultural rich tradition of Scotsmen that have come before me? So I must continue, and come on, Argentina.
Excellent. Okay, I think that's a legitimate answer. Karl Sharro, who's Lebanese, but I think is from the German part of Lebanon rather than the Brazilian part of Lebanon. Karl can explain more about that if he wishes to. He's an architect and writer. You'll know him on Twitter as @KarlRemarks. Karl, who are you supporting now that your country is out?
My country, yeah. So we've been over the whole Germany-Brazil debacle, who gets supported very widely in the previous podcast. I'm not going to dwell on that too much. And I think we maybe will come into that later, but Germany has definitely lost its mojo. So I'm not even I used to support them just because, they go the distance. And in the theme of the episode, I think, they completely lost it. So I'm not supporting them anymore. Basically, my emotion is anybody but Argentina and England, mainly because I live here and because Jude Bellingham has been on fire.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, nothing like the object of glory support no longer delivering on the glory. That's just disappointing. It would be a terrible choice. And finally, Tim Abrahams, also supporter of Scotland, writer and podcaster, host of the Super Urbanism podcast. He also writes about stadiums or stadia. I don't know which one he opts for in the plural. He can tell us and also tell us who he's supporting now.
I go for whoever is paying me to write the thing. They can very much choose whether it's stadia or stadiums. I go by both. Scotland are out. How long ago that seems, and I was never wanted to be. I always thought myself as living in England, being Scottish, big sounding English. I was never wanted to be a bitter jock, and I was kind of always prided myself on being that, and I don't know what it is, age or living here for an increasingly long amount of time, or it could be they're actual getting a little bit more successful, but I'm very much leaning into the bitter jock now, and I'm very much anyone but England. Let's get the let's go Argentina. Really, let's get that done. Let's not have to wait around until France. Let's just get this out of the way, and we can get on with enjoying it. Really, that's my approach.
Excellent. Well, and I should say that I'm Alex Hochuli. I suppose you'll know this as a listener to the podcast, but maybe you're new, in which case, welcome. And I was supporting Brazil. We're going to debate a little bit why Brazil is out. But I guess in absence of that, I'm kind of torn on the Argentina question. I lived in England for a long time. Don't really like England. Don't like France. Don't like anyone. I think I've made this pretty clear over the course of the World Cup on any commentary that I've made, trying to be as prejudiced, even bigoted against everyone as much as possible. I'm okay with Spain winning it, I guess. I'm okay with Spain winning. I'm okay with the novelty of England winning it. Just anyone but France? Is that my position? I suppose anyone but France. There we go, which is a real kind of congenital failure of mine, just to be pro underdog and anti the strong ones, because we get to this stage of the World Cup and it's the disappointment phase of the World Cup. It's not the bright, shiny novelty and exoticism of the group stage, which I love and I wish would come back. Just have lower stakes but more diverse, different flags, more of that kind of World Cup. That's my World Cup. But anyway, we're on to serious things here, as I said, and we need to talk about I think in this episode you'll learn whether to support a colonist and oppressor or whether you should lend your fandom to the wretched of the earth in the global south, and maybe find out whether Argentina is the first category or the second category. I remember hearing Brazilians in the France-Morocco game saying, no, we should support Morocco, support the global south against France, against the colonizer. But I ask you, what about Western Sahara? Does the Polisario Front have its own team? We need to know these. I don't know if you have anyone who's qualified to answer that on this podcast. But anyway, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's okay, because we'll also be talking about whether the expansion to 48 teams was a success, why World Cups are always preceded by protest and complaint, but then everything turns out wonderful afterwards and everyone forgets about those protests and complaints. We'll discuss whether there's a conspiracy against you and your country specifically, and the answer is probably yes. We will ask whether religion is to blame for failure, or a specific religion is to blame for failure, or indeed whether your God is the one true God. We hope to nail that down finally and forever on this podcast. And whether football explains and illustrates the contradictions of neoliberalism and globalization, something that this podcast as a whole tries to do in its regular weekly episodes, or indeed whether this is just Ponzi nonsense made up by intellectuals. And maybe you should just sit back, enjoy your ultralight beer, and debate who was really the superior player of the match. So to get started, that's enough for me. 48 teams, good or bad? I was against it. Now I'm kind of for it. And I would like to personally thank Gianni Infantino for making the past month a lot of fun.
It's a terrible idea. But this is my OCD speaking. It's either 32 or 64. Where did they get the 48 from? I mean, forget about the football. The football, yes, Capo Verde is absolutely brilliant. Want to see more of that. But the OCD part of my brain can't get over third place teams, getting a couple of draws and progressing. So I have two solutions. Either go to 64 full on and have it year round, or go back to 32 and then do intercontinental qualifiers. So in that case, the qualifiers become more interesting. The World Cup becomes more competitive. That's my 2 cents about it.
I feel it's a little bit like the EU, where there's just a compulsive need to expand outwards because of a lack of any other mission of what the football should be doing. But all that said, it's been good. Who hasn't loved Cabo Verde? Even Curaçao getting a result, who's to argue against it? Euan?
Well, I'm not sure if there's, that many arguments against it, apart from exactly as Carl's saying, like the third place stuff is a bit rubbish. It doesn't really work out. And also the fact that you get so many games and the group stages are so big, it means that because the World Cup has this awful thing of every 4 years we end up forgetting about a lot of the amazing fun that we had in the group stage and just basically putting the whole thing down to, those last kind of 6-7 games that we all remember. And so when you have that temporal distance between, Curaçao and Cabo Verde playing all these excellent games in the group stage and what we're about to see now of like literally the 4 top ranked teams in the world being the top 4 in this World Cup, then that's a little bit frustrating. I really like this intercontinental qualification idea because I think that's something that, on this particular, the 48 structure, and potentially if they do want to expand it to 64, speaking from someone in South America, it's going to just completely render South American qualification useless. I mean, next time we're already going to have Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay automatically in the World Cup next time. It's going to completely ruin what is one of the best, or was at least one of the best kind of tests of a football team's mettle, which is to qualify for the World Cup coming out of South America. So that's a kind of frustration from me, but it was good. It was good. I enjoy the flags that you say, the anthems I hadn't heard of in like ever. Iraq's anthem was fantastic. Yeah, I love that stuff.
Do we know if it's the old one? Did they do it? Maybe Carl knows. Is this like a new anthem? Did they post Saddam?
You don't. I haven't said this. I'm half Iraqi as well, so don't get me started. No, this didn't change.
Also, the third place thing, that was such the following Scotland into that, just the absolute massive anticlimax of that was just the work. I mean, we're used to going out, we're used to getting, but we at least allowed that moment of sorrow of just kind of like, that just walking gutted across the pitch, and in the background there's people going nuts. And then in this one, it was just this kind of, we don't know, we have to see what happens. Ooh, and then it just kind of faded away, and the percentages, every morning you got up and the percentages had got smaller of the possibility of them coming through until no one talked about it anymore. It was just this kind of, really un-World Cup-y experience. Just, although, would we have got there if there was only 32 teams? Who knows? That's a different discussion. Yeah, I didn't really like it. Just they're already talking about 64. Let's just that worked okay. I didn't think it would work. I was absolutely certain it would diminish the quality of the group stages. Group stages were absolutely brilliant, and I think, it becomes a bit more like a kind of a one-to-one model of itself if you're just kind of continually expanding it until every single team in the world's playing each other for one competition. But I see no
just a straight knockout of all 200 odd countries in the world.
Yeah.
Just put them in there, no seeding.
Yeah,
just all the way, a long run to the final.
Yeah, you've got to beat 13 teams. You could draw whoever. I don't know what they've got planned for us. I don't feel like I'm in control anymore after this World Cup. I was absolutely certain it was going to be quite good towards the latter stages, but the group stages were going to be mediocre at best, full of kind of cagey nil-nils. It was totally brilliant. I watched, I ended up having to record stuff in the night so I could watch it throughout the day, just staying kind of drip-fed by this stuff. It was great.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I love seeing all the African teams, the Middle Eastern teams. It's just good fun. 64 would be a bit much, but I was a fan of the expansion.
Yeah,
it'd be a bit much for those of us who commit to watching all, 64 games as it is now, or 104 this World Cup. Who can even count anymore? It's a lot of football. But maybe to look at this a little bit more from the outside and kind of look across World Cups, because this is something that we've done in, I think, past episodes that we have. I mean, I know Carl and Euan were on a pre-World Cup episode, and I don't even remember if that was the 2018 or the 2022 World Cup that we did that for. But I thought it might be interesting to look at, kind of stand away from this World Cup and look at it in terms of who the hosts are, what kind of job they've done. And there's several angles to pick at this. So the World Cup has for some decades served as a nation branding exercise. Maybe it always was that, but I think it's become a more self-conscious and explicit sort of exercise. If we look back at the past 20 years, you can trace it even in terms of the sort of nation that is being put forward and being sold, but also the type of nationalism that it kind of is tacit in that image that's being sold. So 2006, which was, I think by all accounts, a pretty great World Cup, at least until the latter stages of it. Everyone seemed to have a lot of fun. I think it's where the notion of the fan park was inaugurated, and that was a huge success, and it was rolled out in future World Cups and Euros and so on. This was like peak postmodern nationalism. This is Germany without its history anymore, unburdened by guilt. It can just wave the flag, and it's all a bit kind of happy clappy, pre-global financial crisis, very end of history World Cup. 2010, you have South Africa. It's the Rainbow Nation coming out on the world stage. In a similar way, 2014, for Brazil was, as a BRICS member, kind of coming out as a kind of fast-growing country, like the other BRICS, but maybe nicer because it's, more peaceful, other than the 60,000 murders a year. But, kind of externally peaceful country that everyone can get behind, the global South's favorite, except that Brazil was in crisis. The yellow shirt became politically contested, and even more so after that World Cup, and the hosting of it was widely protested because of waste, corruption, and so on. So it presented a sort of ambivalent picture. 2018 was Russia also kind of indulging in this exercise of saying, hey, we're not actually toxic. We're open and ready for business, or whatever the slogan was. And this was 4 years before they invaded Ukraine. So that was, they were in Crimea, but they hadn't really done the proper special military exercise of February 2022. And so this was something that people could still just about buy into. 2022 stretched credibility a little bit because it's kind of this fake country of Qatar where only 10% of the population are actually nationals and the rest are imported labor of either of the higher end of kind of Western expats, or a whole lot of cheap and indentured labor from South Asia. So, it's not really a country that you could really get behind. And it was just so self-evidently a sort of branding project and sports washing project that it made it a little bit hard to swallow and to get on board with, like, hey, this is the new South Africa. This is the new Brazil. This is the new Russia. Anyway, so I relate all. Feel free to quibble with my presentation before we get on to 2026.
I think first Arab nation to host the World Cup. I think that's something. I think that's not. I don't think that's insignificant. I think there is certainly to afford them the pleasure of how they presented it themselves. That's very much how they were presenting it. They were there as you walked into the kind of Qatari World Cup kind of pavilion in the years before, and there was a big map of the Arab world, and Qatar was seen as the middle of it. So I feel that the particular moment it comes in with regard to Saudi Arabia coming up on it, there'll be that those hidden narratives will become more to the surface. I think actually but yeah, notwithstanding, I agree with everything else you say, but I do think that that even the fact that they were telling that story to the rest of the Arab world gives it something a little bit more sticky.
But that's what putting Qatar itself to the side. Like, I guess it was good for the other Arab countries to not have to travel so far, and it's in their region. So
they're just like the kind of unfortunate representative of the Arab world from the perspective of the rest of the Arab world.
Hey, listen, it wasn't bad for the Lebanese because they paid Lebanese fans full expenses to put on Qatar jerseys and support them because they couldn't get more than 100 supporters in the stadium. That was good for us. It's good business. But continuing on with your theme, this is why 2026, right? Continuing with your theme, Alex, this was the opportunity for Americans, one opportunity to show that they're not bastards. And what did they do? They acted like complete bastards.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to kind of not come to that conclusion, because if you take the hosts as a whole, Canada, USA, Mexico, what are they saying for themselves? The US presented itself as a land of personal enrichment / extortion. So that was the sell. that they presented. Stadia hard to reach, to all the kind of things that people say about American urbanism in negative terms was kind of proved there. The immigration question, which we're going to come on to, etc. Mexico, I'm not sure what exactly the pitch was, but they came out well. I bet everybody saw the videos of Mexicans having fun. The duck in the kit. Everyone loved the duck in the kit. We don't know what its name was, but great times. Everyone loved Mexico. Canada, I think it's usual. Like, we're not the USA, and that's a bit about all they have to say for themselves. So, I don't know. Did someone who maybe follows this more closely than I, and maybe Tim, I don't know, had a notion of what the sell was of Canada, USA, Mexico 2026 was?
The thing that it's interesting because it does take place under Trump. That's the very often the presidential cycle is. It's really very, very hard to in an American presidential terms, the way they go, to actually be the person that introduces it and oversees it and green lights it, and the president which actually reaps the benefit from it. So I think unequivocally you can say this is Trump's World Cup. And I think, obviously he played a blinder in one sense in revealing and the Infantino intervention. That was absolutely textbook. But I do think there was a hospitality sell. He's a hotelier. And I think he thought, this place is great. It's so great to come to. Come over here. They'll have a great time. It'll be amazing. And all the negative acts that I'm doing and all the kind of pushing back on immigration and denying visas to certain countries is going to affect tourism. So I've got to give tourism a boost. And I think it was pretty much, and I think also the idea of doing it with Mexico and Canada, odd, you would think, but actually they're both known for their hospitality as well. So I think that was, I would say, seeing as I'm sticking up for the thing that everyone else hates here, suddenly, weirdly, I don't know how I managed that, but I think that was possibly what the sell was.
Nice. Okay, so the Hospitality World Cup sponsored by Trivago or whatever, right? Okay.
I think it's fun. Can I just say one thing before you go? I'll shut up. I think it has worked to the degree to which social media has captured lots of people having a lot of fun in America and sending it home. I think that story has kind of crept out, and Americans being, and this the kind of weird mutual self-flattery of Americans, of people suddenly, which happened to Scotland, where we're all like, oh, the Americans love us, so it's great, and the kind of like slightly kind of tickling yourself up a little bit, and everyone comes out feeling nice and great. And I think that so it has kind of worked a bit weirdly.
Juan?
Yeah, I think there isn't really a pitch in terms of propaganda, but logistically, I did see the merit in it. Going back to like the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, like a lot of these kinds of events really have a cost for global South countries, especially, and the Brazilian World Cup being infamous for that. But even in this one in Mexico, like I saw a report about how around the Azteca in Mexico City, like a lot of like the shops and like street vendors that otherwise would have benefited didn't actually benefit because they just walled off that entire district of the city for security reasons, which is completely stupid because Mexico City is actually a very safe city with no like legitimate cartel presence, and cartels don't attack foreigners either way because that would just invite more action from security forces against them, especially during a World Cup. So those kinds of things. But so yeah, by like spreading out the games throughout 3 countries, 2 of which are very developed, I saw some merit to that and think it was good.
So,
but I think Mexico definitely made the most reputational gain out of the World Cup. Genuinely, if you follow things on social media, is everybody England fans after the Mexico game? Everybody's going, Mexicans were amazing. Even after they went out of the game, they made the most amazing kind of reputational gain. Whereas I haven't seen anyone at all go, oh, America is great. They didn't beat us as much. They didn't, you know what I mean? It's like,
I don't think your algorithm gets those ones. I don't think your algorithm gets those ones, Karl. But I think that I did see that. I did see a bit of that. Sorry,
so, I mean, you'll know that like all the World Cups, I mean, you were here for the 2014 World Cup, here in Brazil, and we'll remember the protests and all that preceded it. Every tournament has its pre-tournament. Oh my God, nothing's ready. Everything's everybody's incompetent. This is going to be a disaster. Those sorts of moments. They all might emphasize different aspects of, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. But nevertheless, that's the kind of message. And then it happens. And everyone goes, actually, that was wonderful. Why were we complaining? And I kind of think, there's limitations to both those angles. I think the local problems can be overstated, but by the same measure, the indulgence in the spectacle can allow us to forget a lot of the things and allow us to forget how systematic these problems actually are across World Cups. So when there's going, oh, it's all corrupt and there's these unnecessary stadia being built, or there's whatever else it might be, displacement of people, etc. These are consistent complaints by different people. These are not just kind of local problems.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting. I think this is the first World Cup in a long time where we didn't have big stadium chat beforehand about whether things are going to be ready or not. Because I mean, they've already been, redeveloped and aggrandized for all of this kind of like that stadium in Miami as well is a big thing recently. Getting that done. So there was nothing to do with this particular World Cup, which the next one is going to be fascinating, actually. The next one, we're going to go right back to stadium chat. Keep your eye on the one in Asunción in Paraguay that they're building for that one, which is going to host one match, I think. But to go back to that point, it was, in Brazil, I think sorry, not in Brazil, but in the World Cup as a whole, it's always that we keep coming back to it, in that you've got enough people who, like us, are just obsessed with the thing and will watch all 104 games or whatever. So football in that case always finds a way. We always forget about it. There's not enough time for us to also pay attention to the opening day. There was the protests in Mexico City outside the stadium and in the Zocalo as well, like at the Fan Fest. There wasn't enough time for us to keep an eye on that because we were checking, the South Africa lineup to make sure that we were, ready to watch that game and preparing for the South Korea game later on that day. These kind of things are always going to fall by the wayside. And I think you're right. It's like we go far too far in one direction before the tournament, and then far too far in the other direction as soon as it starts. I mean, I can barely even remember any of these big protests that were happening in Mexico. I'm sure they were for excellent causes, but I can't even remember what it was. It was so long ago now.
Yeah, I mean, Tim, like you and I were discussing this before the World Cup started about, I mean, this dynamic, firstly, and secondly, how in this case the stuff around border control seemed of a different nature to the discussions around corruption, unnecessary stadia being built, money being spent on the World Cup instead of other stuff, deaths of migrant workers, to think of the last World Cup in Qatar, etc. That the border stuff seemed weird because it was like a problem outside of football, but which seemed to directly impact the football itself. It was like a weird case where it was both, right? So, I mean, just to remind people who maybe have forgotten because they've watched too much football and their brains have turned to mush since then, only reserving that little quadrant where you analyze tactics in good nick. The rest of it is just mush. Or perhaps you don't pay attention that much to football, but you were interested in what BungaCast had to say about it, in which case, thank you for being with us. But there was a series of denied entry or visa cases, which hit fans, which hit players, and even officials, which was possibly the most astounding part of it. So a Somali referee was detained for hours. I think the Somali embassy even came in and gave him a diplomatic passport to try to help him into the country. And even then, the US kept him detained. An Iraqi striker was questioned for multiple hours. The Senegalese midfielder, Ghanaian midfielder Thomas Partey was denied entry to Canada because he's accused of rape, which, okay, is very serious, but it's one of these cases where there's football implications for it, which is always a very gray area because it's unclear whether they will be denied entry or not, and it's something that happens at the last minute. And reports that Ivorian and Senegalese fans were just told outright that, you're not meant to come to the United States, don't bother. There was the case where Vozinha, the Cape Verde goalkeeper who became very famous off the back of a Brazilian streaming channel's encouragement of people to go follow him, and he went from having like a couple of 10,000 followers up to now something like 25 million followers. His mother wasn't allowed in. And then an American politician lifted a finger and decided to try to get them in and take advantage of this feel-good story. But then I think it's maybe not clear that she wasn't allowed in. It was just that she didn't have the money to pay for. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. All sorts of these stories. And then, of course, most obviously, the Iran team was restricted to staying in Tijuana, Mexico, over the border. They weren't allowed to spend the night in the United States, and which created havoc for them. I mean, it was an absolute disgrace. And then we're ultimately knocked out by a very limit VAR call. So all of that seemed to be of a different order of fuckery pre-World Cup and indeed during World Cup fuckery than we've experienced in the past. But maybe I'm wrong, Tim.
No, you're right. I think part of the extreme nature of the statistics that abound around Qatar and the number of workers that died in the making of the World Cup was a very astute move by some unions, international, or kind of, I can't remember their name. I should, because I'm on the podcast. But they effectively gathered. They effectively took information from the embassies of the South Asians, Indians, Pakistanis, and they found out how many people had died whilst from the South Asia in Qatar in the years from taking this information from the beginning of the World Cup. And they said every single person that died during that time in Qatar from those countries died as a consequence of the World Cup, and that was the figure that was carried out. When in actual fact, in the end, the Indians were taking out government kind of releasing press releases saying that's pretty normal death figures for people of those age. That is not to say that there are extremely horrific conditions in construction sites across the Middle East, but that knowledge of the susceptibility at those moments of a narrative of a media machine that is looking for negative stories about a host country, and to publish that and very successfully to the degree to which it pretty much established that the World Cup caused these deaths is a kind of that in extremis. I kind of get it for the World Cup. For not the World Cup, for the Olympics, which is something of a kind of obsession of mine, and because I saw it up close in London, and it doesn't quite tag for the World Cup, but there's a huge amount of development cost and money which goes on the expenditure, and a lot of people don't agree that sport should be getting all that money. And I suppose it does translate to the World Cup. And that's when there's nothing tangible yet to enjoy, that's when that narrative becomes dominant. And it's the people who want to kind of inhibit development as well. That's the time when those people have. But then there's also moments where people use that narrative pause for other reasons, which is I think what happened in Qatar. And they did it, and I understand why they did it. But I don't quite get it. All I would say was that I noticed in London the class-based issue of people who didn't want the Olympics in London, didn't thought it was like, a kind of a middle-class exceptionalist attitude towards sports, not really mine. And then they saw this thing come. They saw it actually be a really uniting force, and they actually felt at one with the people that they didn't really want to feel at one with. I just saw that as a sociological thing, really, just an observation. And I don't know, but I don't know how that translates.
I mean, maybe we are too dismissive of, buying into the spectacle, the bit where you forget about all the local complaints and protests and buy into the thing and go, well, but, that's just us being brainwashed, or it's either them being brainwashed, or maybe you include yourself in one of the brainwashees and go, yeah, I also bought into it and stopped caring about the protests in the Zocalo and whatever, because I was just enjoying the football. But I think that perhaps understates how important these events are globally, nationally, in kind of recognizing each other as a part of a collectivity, whether national or kind of humanity as a whole, without being too saccharine about it. And maybe is there something to be said for these moments as a kind of, every 4 years ritual that we all get together, and that to not spend money on it, to try to do it cheap and cheerful World Cup, whatever, would be to kind of do down the significance of such a thing. You know, there aren't many temples to the people, palaces of the people built nowadays. You know, your local metro station that's just been put up will not feature chandeliers. You know, it won't be a beautiful palace of the people. And maybe in absence of that, we should have these big stadia. Maybe that is our popular palace these days, and we should not be so dismissive of it as mere spectacle, which is brainwashing us sheeple. Karl?
I was worried that you're going to come to me after this. No.
Oh, well, you were nodding, so
No, but I think it's not just the stadia, because I think in every tournament is the amount of people that are actually there is insignificant to the amount of people who are watching it through this unite. And you made this point on your one of your recent articles, is kind of there's a kind of global consciousness that coming together, right? Because some people are watching it in the morning, some people are watching it at night, but we're all watching the same thing on TV, on our phones, or whatever. And I think that's the real power of the spectacle. It's a bit of a tired kind of thing. And we're actually not watching the World Cup. We're watching other people watching it, right? They're part of the action. They're not, you know, they're not spectators. Notice how much the camera dwells on them, right? They give us this sense that we're part of that global spectacle. And I think it's fantastic. I mean, you know, it allows all these kind of different geopolitical subplots to take place in a very harmless way. It's not like it's rife with hooliganism or anything like that. It's all a bit of a banter. But I think I love it for that. And the biggest the stadia are, is not because more people are watching the World Cup. We have more, we can watch more people watching the World Cup, right? So you're getting, this is like by proxy. And the reality is we are the intended audience, not the people who are there. These are like delegates, right? And generally, they're very objectionable people. The people who can afford to take a month off to go to the World Cup, they're very objectionable, affluent people. I mean, and they're horrible people, right? So it's not about them; it's about the rest of us, and that's why I love it. And I love, like, whenever they say they've been inconvenienced and it was hot or whatever, I was great. I didn't have to go, and somebody else paid a lot of money and felt hot and couldn't, you know, had to buy a beer for $50. Yeah, serves you right, but you're doing a very important role in bringing us all together as a global collective.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I like that. I like that notion of the people in the stadiums and around them are like this kind of stage army that is called upon, or indeed, you know, people's delegates, people's representatives, the people's legitimate representatives. Tim?
Just a small story just to corroborate what you're saying there about the England fan who's become just really, really famous because he looks like it looks like the ultimate English fan. And he's kind of just got a media career and is now kind of being taken to the World Cup because he just looks like the archetypal England fan.
Is this the fat, bald guy behind Harry Kane who's looking at Harry Kane as
he looks a bit like Jeff Hurst does now. He just looks like a kind of owns something that costs over $1 million in the home counties guy who follows England around. He just looks like that guy and has become kind of this really niche. I think it's very much within England. He's become this niche celebrity, but it's really struck me.
Or you've got the Norwegian pedant who refuses to row with all the rowers because the Vikings didn't actually row across the ocean. They rowed down rivers.
I love that guy. That guy is the epitomization of justice and the spirit of absolute academic precision. Plus, can we just get on to it with it? That rowing thing, the Norway thing, is the most annoying thing I've ever seen in my life.
completely worst thing ever.
Euan?
No, I was actually supporting England towards the end. I went, there'll be no more rowing. Go on, just knock them out, and we'll wait until Argentina. It got to that point, and it's just this kind of like it took the really cool bit from Iceland in 2016, that kind of ooh noise that they did, and which, you know, obviously that goes to my soul as being the sound of England being beat, and then the kind of Swedes Swedes nicked it for a bit, and they added the rowing. So it's this really kind of, it's like a log floating around the North Sea. This idea,
It was the sound
this
of
is a podcast without George, so it's like we can just kick England as much as we want. There's going to be no riposte.
By the way, Tim, it was the sound of England being beat and the sound of the UK exiting the European Union, because it all happened in the same week.
Great days.
Euan or Juan, do you want to come in on this quickly before I move on to the very serious question of Argentina?
No, yeah, I'm looking forward to the Argentina question.
Okay, so the Argentina question is as follows. Argentina, actually evil? Or if you want more elaboration, on the pitch, there's been this total conspiracy to help Argentina, which is very visible to everybody, and not just to help Argentina, but to help the moat, as he's called, Lionel Messi. That is the most monetizable of all time. The Arab world in particular is inflamed, particularly maybe even in flames. Egypt, if you didn't catch this game, one of the highlights of the World Cup, was minutes away from knocking out Argentina, but had a perfectly good goal ruled out. A lovely goal, in fact. And actually, it's even worse when a lovely goal gets ruled out, because there's so little beauty in the world these days. They should just, have a panel which decides. Was it a beautiful goal?
That's an act of beauty itself.
Let it stand.
That's pure World Cup. Pure World Cup. It's that 90. We're back to German goalkeepers kicking French forwards in the face. It's part of it.
But then Egypt had a penalty denied as well, which they should have had, and it was an outrage. I want to hear what Karl has to say about someone who has his ear to the ground of the Arab street, famously. But Juan wanted to come in first.
Yeah, go ahead, Juan.
Karl can take it first.
No, please go ahead. I'm an Arab. You have to be my guest. You have to go first.
All right. Well, I wanted to say a lot before actually answering the question itself. It's just funny to me politically. Someone sent me this thing, this thread that was popular on X about how right wingers prefer Ronaldo and left wingers prefer Messi, because Ronaldo's just this arrogant prick, and Messi has been married to the same woman for however 30 years or whatever. He's very faithful and is a family man and much more humble in general. There's exceptions. On the other hand, it was funny to read that, because Messi has become more associated with right wing politics. He's himself is in Miami. He's posing pictures with Milei and Trump. I mean, he's never really talked about anything political, but that kind of gives a sort of vibe. And at the same time, Argentina now is this so-called libertarian utopia. So you have that additional conversation. I've seen some people talking about how, no, we need Argentina to lose because they're not really the global South anymore, as Alex was alluding to, and they're all white and whatever. I saw this thing of Nick Fuentes, the white supremacist or whatever, when they beat Egypt, that yes, this proves white excellence. And it's well, the funny thing, you look at a lot of the Argentine players, they are still mixed race. Argentina has a significant mestizo population that isn't really talked about, but you just look at them, they're not quite fully Caucasian.
I like that you get the notorious anti-Semite Nick Fuentes being pro-Argentina, while Argentina is also being criticized for being, deeply Zionist on the other hand. So you can just project anything you want, actually.
Excellent point. Excellent point. But so as for the question itself, I think there's definitely been favoritism. First of all, I mean, I don't know exactly how these things work, but they seem to have gotten extraordinarily lucky that their however many first couple of opponents have been, none of the big teams. That with the Egypt game, personally, I think that, that goal was annulled, and, I can see a case for it, but it's dude, you should have called the foul immediately, letting that whole thing progress to a goal and then annul it. Why would you do that? And then later on, it's this isn't the same standard. Why then do you not call the foul or review it for Egypt later at the end, which just seemed like a penalty? I mean, there's some debate about that. I will give the other side that An Argentine friend of mine, he pointed out, for instance, that after Egypt's second goal, I believe, I forget who scored, he like took off his shirt, and that should have been a yellow card by the rules or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's been anything too egregious in any of the other games, right?
Well, the Balogun question where
the
Trump
yellow card
intervened in
thing.
favor of overturning the red card given out to the American striker.
Oh yeah,
was
and I'll be honest,
particularly
I support that. Maybe just out of self-interest because I live in the U.S., but also, you know, it makes it a better game. Like at least Belgium beat
this is utter nonsense. Come on.
Belgium beat the best version of the U.S. fair and square 4-1 and humiliated them. So really, there was no excuse.
This showed how deeply the United States still does not understand football, because there are lots of people going, "What? How dare Belgium complain? Wouldn't you want to see the play against the strongest version of your opponent?" Like, what the fuck? No, who the hell said? No, you want to win by hook or by crook.
You're right. I won't dispute that.
I think though on Balogun and everybody assumed it's something to do with Trump being really kind of interested in the American soccer team. I don't think that's why he pardoned him, as everybody's saying, is like a pardon the turkey. It's basically because his name ends with gun. So I think Trump just thought he's like, he's pro guns, you know, he wants to see them. But on the Argentina thing, I mean, they're absolutely the most hated team at the moment. And everybody's bringing all their politics into it. But for me, it's not that. I think I've borrowed that affluent a little bit on generally Latin Americans just hating them because, you know, they think of themselves as Europeans and white and whatever. But I think that was absolutely blatant, in your face cheating against Egypt. And this comes to my thesis, which I'm thinking actually going back to university and writing a PhD about it, which is in defense of conspiracy theories in football. Why? It's the only arena of public life in which conspiracy theories are harmless. So I suggest the following is go and indulge yourself when it was clearly, you know, there was cheating going on against Egypt, who were dominating Argentina and playing a great game, and they were going to go on to win. And they were robbed, right? I mean, that goal is like, they had to go 5 minutes back to cancel it. So it's like, what's the harm in indulging conspiracy theories? It's the World Cup. You're going to moan about it for 3 days. In fact, we should make it an official thing. You're allowed to moan about it for 3 days. Say whatever conspiracy theories you want about it, and that's it. It ends after 3 days. This is not like an anti-vaccine conspiracy. This is not like an anti-migrant conspiracy. In fact, if you allow conspiracy theories in football, it will take away the pressure from other areas of public life and maybe lead to kind of weakening of right-wing sentiments and the whole kind of conspiracy theories in public life. So I think it's a fantastic thing. You know,
to be properly Girardian about it, I mean, we have to understand that the way that we can have peace in our society is in some ways to end the continuing existence of Gianni Infantino as a human being, and that will resolve many other issues. Now, I'm not calling for a violent act to be committed. I'm just recognizing what a philosopher says and trying to apply it to this very real world situation. Is that right?
It's quite the opposite. It's quite the opposite. You want him to be there because he can preside over this erratic regime. He can preside over that and become like a safety valve for public sentiment, right? So anybody can indulge in any conspiracy theory. Where else should you be allowed to like indulge in conspiracy theories? I mean, I'm a reasonable man. I went like a 12-hour spree after Egypt lost. And by the way, everyone online thinks I did that because I'm like this pan-Arab nationalist who wants Arab teams to succeed. None of that. It's only because Mohamed Salah until very recently played for Liverpool, right? And I took that very personally. That's it. That's the only explanation. But, you know, let yourself go. That should even be institutionalized. It should be built into the DNA of the World Cup. And long live Infantino with his kind of erratic decision making and his backroom dealings to enable us to enjoy those conspiracy theories.
kind of say whatever you want after a massive loss or victory in the World Cup, indulge in these footballing conspiracy theories. And in that vein, I completely, I don't see the pro Argentina thing. I haven't seen it throughout the whole thing. I think the referee's making good calls the whole time. The one that I think is really suspicious, really, really, really suspicious, is the final group game for Argentina. Messi's rested. He comes on for like the last half an hour against Jordan. And then he gets this free kick in front of the 18-yard box, and then for some reason the Jordan goalkeeper just decides to place himself behind his own wall so that he can't see Messi take the free kick, and then he gets an easy goal to kind of continue the record. But the rest of the stuff, I just I'm not sure. Maybe I spend too much time in Argentina.
Yeah, well, it's true. Maybe this is it. You're there doing your commentary in Buenos Aires, and you've just gone soft on Argentina.
I can explain. I can explain the Jordanian thing.
Just to finish, I'm just like I'm shocked and actually disappointed at the fact that we're about to have England against Argentina, and somehow England are going to be portrayed worldwide as the good guys. How can we do this, guys?
Well, look, we need to be very clear. I was creating a list. And Karl and Juan should come in after me, but creating a list of who is the most hated on each continent. Because I think that people aren't aware of this. Lots of people were saying, well, all of Latin America will be supporting Argentina. I'm like, whoa, hello. This is a newsflash here. This is really not how things work here. And it's a little bit like saying, oh, well, all the Europeans will band together and support England. It's like, well, then, no, this isn't how it works. England are the most hated in Europe. I think probably quite clearly. There might be exceptions, some small little tiffs, Croatians and Serbians or Germans and Dutch, although that's quite one-sided. But really, it's the English. I think everyone around Europe can agree that English are the least liked in Europe. Argentina is the least liked in South America and indeed probably across Latin America as a whole.
Or Chile.
Yeah, that's a good point. People forget about them. Skinny little Chile. If they come back, we can.
Yeah, they need to qualify for us to, for the continent really to start hitting on them again.
And then in Asia, I think people don't like, at least in East Asia, they don't like the Japanese. I don't know who the most hated in the Middle East is, if there's or Middle East and North Africa, if there's a candidate for that. I think probably Morocco is the least liked there. In the rest of Africa, it's Nigeria or South Africa. So just to make this clear, every continent has its least liked country and least liked group of fans as well. Juan?
I will just say in response to you, and for instance, Mbolo getting expelled, getting those 2 yellow cards, the second one for diving. I completely celebrate that, and I think that should be the standard. But in practice, very few players get yellows for diving. And I'm just going to say this, the England game against Norway, there was some serious diving. Bellington and Kane, both multiple dives, in my opinion, at least. Those should have been yellow cards.
There wasn't any as egregious as Mbolo's, though.
His was pretty bad. But let's be real. In general, they don't really, give a handout yellows for any kinds of dives at all. If they did, I would celebrate it. I mean, and I think they could. If they really just, took the VAR and set it on all the players and just constantly reviewing, it's like, okay, that was a dive, here's your yellow. They would just end it completely, but they're not going to do that.
You're trying to take deception out of football, which is, I think, really misunderstands the spirit of the game. Karl?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, come on, Maradona is, the greatest player of all time, and that's just part of his toolkit, It's like...
Sorry to interrupt you real quick, Karl, but all of this is to say that in that particular case with Mbolo against Argentina, it does seem like, they're kind of favoring Argentina because they made that call to help Argentina, but typically not.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's part of my conspiracy theory, which is real, because it's rarely that VAR would come back to intervene. It's not the fact that they gave the red card. It's that VAR intervened for them to give up a second yellow card on a dive outside the penalty. I mean, it's just a joke. Now,
exactly.
Look, what's the sinister thing here? The sinister thing is not that sinister. It's not like Argentina is part of, the Aryan supremacist international league or whatever. It's just that they want the top 4 seeds to get to the semifinals, right? Because it's better ratings. And I'm I might walk away from this if there's a threat of a serious legal action by FIFA against me. But I want I wanted to briefly explain the Jordanian things. Jordanians are very hospitable people. They're the most generous people you can imagine. And genuinely, he felt like Lionel Messi has just come on, he hasn't scored, and he had to give him a chance to score. He didn't even make any attempt at blocking the shot, right? But that leads me to my other point. You know, that whole thing where like Lionel Messi now is seen as dodgy, whatever, all his connection, whatever. Has anyone genuinely considered the possibility that this is, again, one of the greatest football players of all time? He's a football genius, but he's a complete fuckwit in real life.
Oh,
He's an
this is my
airhead.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, he's
an idiot savant. He's an idiot savant.
Yeah,
He like has nothing. He doesn't understand how humans
absolutely.
work. He's just amazing at football. That's it.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what I hate about, you know, the whole Ronaldo him era is you don't get, they are plastic players, right? You go back to Maradona, very deeply flawed human beings, absolutely fantastic. You know, rose against all the odds, had all this like being kicked and fouled against in Italy, and nobody's doing anything about it, and you know, drugs and the whole thing. Real people, like he was a real human being. Then you get to the Ronaldo Messi generation. Okay, you score a lot of goals, but you're fucking boring. You're plastic as fuck. Fuck off.
Tim, really quickly, because we need to get on to this very serious question of what happened to the drinking, womanizing footballers, and are evangelicals responsible?
Just when I started thinking maybe this Argentina thing's was when I was watching the France game, and when Mbappe was given a penalty in the last 2 minutes of I can't remember who it was against. Mbappe gets, and I've never seen a referee try harder to put a player off taking a penalty as that referee did with Mbappe. It's really, I was like, wait, dude, are you? He was literally kind of like, Mbappe was going
Against
up, can
Morocco,
I take it now?
yeah.
And he was like, yeah, Morocco. It was.
Oh, that was the one that he missed, or that got blocked,
and
right?
And he missed, and he missed it. It was literally kind of like, and he was going, have you blown? I'm like, I mean, what are you doing? And then he kind of let him go again, and he was going up to the ball 3 times. It was like, yeah. No, I think it's
against Morocco.
I thought that wasn't on. Yeah, obviously the delay was ridiculous, but I actually kind of think that it came from the opposite direction of like, this is an Argentine guy who's been put on this game, France Morocco. Like, he's under massive pressure to show himself as being like, no, I need to get all decisions right here. Showing like, no, we're going to have a real big VAR check on this, and we're going to make sure that we get the right decision.
That's exactly what an Argentinian. That's exactly what an Argentinian would want you to think, isn't it? Really?
Exactly.
Yeah. No,
but why would an Argentinian? The bit that I didn't get: why would an Argentinian referee want France against them in the semifinal or final? I forgot which is.
No, he tried to put Mbappe off taking the penalty, so he missed it.
Yeah, but I mean, what's the subtext here? Why would I followed all of that? But why would an Argentinian ref want France playing against Argentina? Surely they wouldn't.
They're trying to make sure that Mbappe would miss the penalty, Morocco would win,
I see.
and France would be out. Yeah.
I mean, that was
deep.
A classic.
It's layers, man. Yeah. It's layers to this conspiracy. Yeah. And I understand why you didn't get it, because they're one step ahead.
The finest minds in the world are dedicated.
Tim, in my defense, it was a fairly stupid comment.
It's a great defense of yourself. Right. So one of the funniest things to come out of this World Cup, and especially since Brazil's exit in the last 16, is this idea that Brazil's long decline is due to evangelical Christians. Now, if you haven't followed this, and I am struck and surprised every single day. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like every single day there's a new thing on this, and I can't believe it's still being discussed, a good week and a half on. But if you're not aware, Brazil's gone 24 years now since the last World Cup title, which is as long a wait as between Brazil's third and fourth World Cups. That is between 1970 and Pelé and 1994 and Romário and Bebeto. So during that earlier drought, though, so goes this argument, Brazil didn't lose its soul. You had the famous 1982 team, which is possibly the most beloved Brazil side of all, with Zico, Sócrates, Falcão, etc. And so what's galling about the current period, and this I'm not kind of relaying someone's argument, but I feel it too in a way, is that in the current period, this current drought, not only is it no longer the Brazil of old, creative, spontaneous, joyful, but it's also not even being successful. It's not like, the famous 1994 team, which many people felt Brazil had traded those old virtues for the virtues of organization and rigidity, which actually led them to win the World Cup. So what's the reason for this? And the obvious explanation is to be found with football writer Max Weber and his tactics guide, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, which explains everything that's to be known here quite obviously. This all started with a Facebook post, or rather a Twitter post, I think, which is then taken up and has become of this wide-ranging discussion. Even the Times of London picked it up, basically saying, look, Protestantism is growing in Brazil, specifically evangelical and charismatic sects now account for 27% of the population. But you could argue that its cultural impact is well beyond that of a quarter of the population. 77% of the players in the Seleção are now evangelical. And, so in the old Brazil, players used to drink and screw around. It was the age also of Maradona, which Karl has already referenced. And this made the football both beautiful and victorious at the same time. And this seems to confuse a lot of different things, right? I'm not going to hide what I feel on this. It's quite obvious that this is a load of bullshit, because there's two different things. One is, has there been a change in national character and the way that football is played? And the other one is, why is Brazil not being successful in football, right? And those are they might be connected. You might argue that they are connected, but a lot of people argue that they kind of point in opposite directions. And I think Euan might have some smarter thoughts on this than I do. Euan's lived his whole adult life in Brazil, but originates from the most divided city on the footballing planet, torn between Catholics and Protestants, and actually sides with the Catholic half. So he surely is going to argue that the Reformation needs to be reversed so that Brazil can win the next World Cup.
Yeah, no, that's it. As a Glaswegian Celtic supporter, it's usually really quite easy for me to blame Protestants for everything that's wrong in society. But I think in this particular case, you're right, Alex. It's absolutely bizarre, and not the fact that it's just been spread around so much at the moment. It's like, this is an argument that I'm sure Alex has heard this as well. But like previous World Cups, it's always been brought up by your kind of your like wacko left drinking buddy is always like, yeah, the problem is they're all Protestants now. That's why these guys aren't womanizing anymore. They're not doing enough drugs. And suddenly this guy is now being the kind of like a global agenda setter sort of thing. So it's a bizarre moment for people living in Brazil who have heard this argument before. But also, like, as a good friend told me the other day, that if that was the problem, if the problem was just that Brazilian footballers weren't like snorting cocaine and hanging out with strippers all the time, that would be great, because it's really easy to fix, right? But that's not the issue. Because I don't know how football-y we want to go here, but I mean, we saw Brazil basically get beat off a Norway team that had double the amount of passes as Brazil, more midfield. Brazil were completely devoid of a midfield whatsoever. So this is just like the development issue is just so much greater than the rise of evangelicalism, which is it's a fascinating area of study in Brazil, and obviously has brought around a lot of changes. But I don't think you can really blame them for the football as much as maybe some people would like to. I don't think you can blame them for the football.
What is to blame for the football?
That's disappointingly sensible, though. I mean, it's right on, but disappointingly sensible.
So what is to blame? What is to blame then?
Well, I mean,
yeah, sorry.
I've always been on this kind of idea that the Brazilian football development is just completely rotten from the base all the way up. You can see, under 15s teams in Brazil, the coaches are like, if they don't win, if they don't win against, their rivals, the coach is going to get sacked. This under 15s coach. It's all about results. It's all about winning. And so, they favor this kind of rubbish, quite defensive, but also just really not conducive to actual development, that sort of football. And also, Brazil, as in almost any other country outside of Europe, their footballing economic model is to sell talents to the major leagues of Europe. And the way that Brazil has done it, Brazil has been is known amongst top agents for these clubs and scouts of these clubs as being like really quite open to agents and for clubs to come in and make deals for their young players. And also, like, at the very basic development level, these clubs know that they need to make some money off the talent they've got. So what's the best way to make money off these guys? Put them out wide, make them a winger, teach him how to dribble a little bit better, make sure he scores some goals, and then he's going to sell really, really quickly. And so Brazil ends up with then thousands of wingers and, like, you know, no fullbacks, for example, which is a huge, huge issue. And also, you know, and even in the non-like goal-scoring positions, you get these guys, because of the way scouting is, not because of the way, you know, the you know, recruitment is around the world. Yeah, development and recruitment is all based on just the data inside their sports bras constantly. So these guys are always paying complete attention to all of their statistics during the game. There's no, you know, one of the most promising midfielders, like proper midfielders in Brazil, was in the squad actually. Danilo Santos plays at Botafogo here in Brazil. And there was a point at the start of this season where, like, Botafogo went through the month and they got hammered in 3 or 4 games. And at the end of the month, Danilo is like posting on his Instagram how he is like the top in SofaScore's power rankings for, you know, the Brazilian league that month because he made X amount of key passes and, you know, successful dribbles and all that sort of stuff. And this goes all the way down to the, you know, this all the way down to the base of the thing. There's no, you know, development is completely rotten in Brazil. There's far too much to fix first before we fix the Protestants.
Although, you know, if you're pointing to quantification as a problem, that can be traced back to the Protestant Reformation and the spirit of capitalism. So, you know, they are still tied. Yeah. Okay. Right? Juan, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I think all that from Euan is just completely correct. And I agree that the evangelical narrative is bogus. But all that being said, I just want to say I personally find the evangelical narrative to be amazing. And yeah, it's just been very entertaining, and it's always fun to dunk on the evangelicals.
I mean, I do have to thank Euan for giving the right BungaCast flavored answer to this, which is like, no, it's the defeat of national developmentalism, which is really, really a cause here. It's globalization's fault, etc. I like that. Very on brand.
It was all Collor and Cardozo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which another target, which I'm very happy to blame as well, Karl.
Yeah, can I do the opposite, which is like the sectarian Middle East version? So first of all, you're conflating evangelicals and Protestants, and because Norway is Protestant and they beat Brazil, right? So I'm trying to keep this conspiracy theory alive, right? So the problem with evangelicalism, and not in a big sense, in a football sense, I don't want them going after me. They have drones and shit. Is because basically it's decontextualized. Right. So like Protestantism is embedded everywhere where it's been a religion for a long time. The problem with evangelical trends that you get now is that they are decontextualized. And I think that kind of takes them into a different place, a different kind of outlook. And I've had this theory for a long time that only ever Catholic countries have won the World Cup. And people will turn and say England. Well, England isn't proper Protestant, right? It's fake. It's like they just did it so he can get divorced. It's for all intents and purposes.
But he did it to get I mean, and that's the most like Catholic thing you could possibly do. You know,
exactly. Yeah. And then even Germany was forever slightly more Catholic than Protestant. But that's kind of if you're putting traditional Catholic against traditional Protestant. So this is a very weak argument, but I think we should keep the evangelical thing going for the next week. But again, going back to my conspiracy theories, that kind of lapses at the end of the World Cup. Don't take the fun out of it. This is how, on a kind of slightly more serious thing, this is kind of the soap opera element of the World Cup. 90% of people don't relate to the World Cup through tactics and who's playing where and are playing 4-4-2 or 4-3-3, whatever. They need the human drama, right? And they need the human element and they need the stories. And that's just part of it.
All right. To be serious about it again and to be very BungaCast about it, we have some related topics, kind of drawing towards the end here, but one is neoliberalism and globalization, and the other one is nationalism. Firstly, I think just to build briefly, and I think Tim wanted to say something on this, building on what Euan was saying about Brazilian clubs basically developing players for export, and therefore prioritizing a certain model of player and whatever. The countries which have done it correctly, France is the original model where they've with the development of Clairefontaine, the kind of national center of development, which sets a pattern of how you want to develop players, dictates it to the other clubs and so on. But this is France. This is the home of dirigisme, or where at least it managed to retain some of those elements of steering capacity at the level of the central state, despite kind of neoliberal transformations elsewhere. Tim, tell us more.
Yeah, I'm always reluctant to indulge in the politicization of football or the political analogies, because I always think of the kind of comparison between France and England. And just in England, if you think about it, currently England is perhaps one of the countries in developed world which is least able to organize any process of building infrastructure over any considerable period of time. And yet, particularly in the 2000s, 2010s, 2020s, and yet what Gareth Southgate pretty much did was set up as the head of elite sport in the 2010s, 2012s, worked with a lot of people, it wasn't just him, a group of people in which they came up with the values for the England setup from the kind of early training. I kind of saw this because I was training as a youth coach, and as I was training as a youth coach, he had then the material that he'd implemented, the ideas that he'd implemented, the England team were then going on to be successful. And it was exactly the same messaging that he was saying to the national team as I was being taught to tell to a young group of players. It was based on pick and mix. He did a tour, lots of Pep Guardiola in there, but also a lot of the French as well, encouraging. It told things. It was like introducing elementary sports science to volunteer coaches. And in England, the volunteerism is really important. It is a kind of a hidden world or structure to English society, particularly. It's similar to Scotland, but that's more, there's differences. And the volunteerist aspect is really important because the FA is effectively still a kind of pseudo-volunteer organisation, although it's professionalised. And a lot of this money, although not enough by any stretch of the imagination, comes from the Premier League. So you've got a little bit of independence. It's not government money. It's not like the French system where it's kind of coming down through it. It's like this kind of really badly organized because it's really old and has got lots of old-fashioned rules, volunteer-based organization with a professional bit slapped on top, who then kind of ineptly organizes all aspects of football. But Southgate's presence within that organization, both within organizing the elite sport in the 2010s and then coming back. And I mean, it's not all like, he's not like a 4D chess player, right? There's a lot of luck that's gone into that. But I think this team is kind of his team, but with a better. I think they've kind of the whole structure and system is bought into, and the government has had nothing to do with it at all. It's all come through there's a bit of lottery funding in there as well, but it doesn't have that French style at all. And the French one, there's 51 players came from Paris this tournament, which is incredible.
Yeah, across different countries. Yeah.
Sorry, for different countries. 51 players across different countries. And that comes from a kind of very specific urban environment, which is pretty monoculture. The banlieues of Paris are, it's like school, work, football club. That's what's there. And I think that they've arrived at similar points, but from very, very different sides.
Interesting. Karl.
Yeah, and it's actually 51 from Paris and 90 from France. There are 90 players, and I think that's genuinely on a political level. And by the way, I don't get people who say don't bring politics into the World Cup. It's basically a competition that kind of puts conflict among nation states what else other than it being political? But to go back to that, I normally make this argument in the context of infrastructure. Why is France good at building infrastructure and Britain is so terrible at it, which is the central state? And I think in this instance is far more reaching, because that's not accidental, that's not genetic, that's all contextual. And also the success of the production of so many talented footballers and making them elite footballers, and they can play for all these countries. So there's a functioning system, is highly centralized and highly capable of harnessing these talents and giving them a sense of purpose. But also I want to take it another step, because one of the most tedious jokes you see online these days, there's only one Muslim team left, it's France, ha ha ha. And I'm like, yes, the most tedious, stupidest joke. I mean, I don't understand where they're trying. Like, what's the implication over here? France is under 10% Muslim, right? And it's basically
I saw the same version with England. I don't know which is better or
I've
worse.
seen it with England as well, but I don't understand what the implication is, because basically the argument against immigrants is that they don't integrate. And when they integrate and go and become successful for their teams, then somehow you still found a way of criticizing them for it. And it's this whole thing, this is like, it's the only remaining African team. And it's like, I don't want to sound like a wet liberal here, but these are people that are choosing to play for England, and they play proudly for England. People that are choosing to play for France, and they're playing proudly for France because it's their version of France or their version of England that they want to see in action. And that's a manifestation of a political subjectivity. And I think that's the other really interesting layer about all of that, is they're choosing to participate not by disavowing the national, but by playing under the flag, right? It's a sense of claiming it. And again, that speaks to a measure of the success of that model, not necessarily in a top-down way, right? Because they are choosing to participate in it and being great at it, and it's not even a question. But on the other hand, again, when you watch France and you watch England play, you can tell that the French are far more successful at it, right? And again, I don't want to turn it into a parable for sort of globalization or whatever. It's just we are where we are, and people are choosing to exercise a certain allegiance through football. And you know what, it might not be that deeply political. It might be they're doing it because it gives them an opportunity to play on the international. I mean, famously, Olise could have played for England. He chose to play for France. Who would blame him? but I think there's something really positive about it. And in a way, to go back to like a Bunga kind of theme, that kind of sense of I always just say this thing, like, immigrants should be, if they're patriotic, that actually means more because they've chose to be in that country. They're not giving their allegiance to their country of birth, but country that they chose to be in. And I think maybe is there a glimmer, and you alluded to this, Alex, in the discussion, in the preparation, that there's some sort of subjectively driven, agency-driven sense of collectivism can come out of that. And unfortunately, it has to be at the expense of beating another country.
Yeah, I mean, so I want to allow Tim in, and I also would want to come to Juan in a second, because there's an interesting case of national identification or non-identification that happened in Colombia with seemingly political consequences. But just I want to make a brief note, because it's not just a sort of a wet liberal argument about, well, all these black players are actually really French, blah blah blah. There's a double standard expressed both on the right and the left, although in opposite directions. So on the right, you can have people say, as a waiter said to me in Marseille or near Marseille relatively recently, when France plays Senegal, haha, it's all Africans. Like, these players aren't really French. At the same time as that, when a French player decides to go play for Morocco or Senegal or wherever it might be, they go, "What? You're abandoning the country that raised you? How dare you?" But then, on the left, or the kind of progressive liberals, there's kind of the same thing as well, where they go, well, no, everybody who's here is French, and they're absolutely French. They don't listen to what the racists say. Everyone's welcome here who wants to be French, or whatever metropolitan country we might be talking about. They're welcome here. And then when like France wins, they go, well, did you know these are all Africans? This is actually a really good point. This is a win for Africans. So, kind of undermining their own argument there as well. So there's double standards on both sides. Tim?
I can't remember what I was going to say. That was such a good point.
Every podcast was like this.
Sorry.
Colombia.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just rub it. It's a really good point that Karl makes. I just think about and that you make. I just think about. I was reading about the way in which the process of, shall we say, Moroccan footballing structures, footballing scouts are going. Kind of, there's this trek of kind of movement around, effectively, of several clubs around Paris. So does it dominate, of coaches from Morocco under 16, Cote d'Ivoire, all around, looking for the players who are not going to make it with France. And that's really such a freaky, odd, and unpleasant direction. I maybe I'm overstating it, but I was reading about these guys, and it just sent a little bit of a kind of that chill through it. And also, perhaps I'm over dramatizing it, but there are 8 sets of brothers that played at this World Cup.
Yeah,
only 3 of them in the same team. That's weird.
I mean, there's so many great statistics on this.
There's huge levels of chance and all kinds of stuff coming into play there for us to be quite so sure of that. Of what you're saying, I think I'm just questioning it a little bit.
No, but I mean, only 8 of the 48 teams do not have a player born abroad in their squad. So 8 out of the 48 are all like born in the country that they're playing for. 23% of all players in this World Cup are foreign-born, which is up from 16% at the last World Cup. And it's up from around 10% for all the previous World Cups, more or less, from recent decades. So, a very marked increase, and it's a real phenomenon of national teams, especially weaker national teams, going and recruiting amongst diasporas, which, of course, does complicate this argument that we're having about kind of national integration, and that if you're born in a place and raised there, you are from there. It doesn't matter where your ethnic background or any of that bullshit is, right? But it does kind of complicate the matter if people are going off and playing for their for some diaspora place, which is where their grandparents came from or whatever. On the other hand, who's going to deny like this, Cabo Verde their day in the sun by being able to recruit some guy on LinkedIn to come play for them? It's some great stories there as well.
And apparently they took them on a tour of the country before the tournament to know where they're representing. But hey, this is the world we live in. Hey, look, Lebanon won the Mediterranean Rugby League Championship, not having a single rugby tournament in Lebanon or a single rugby team. They were all Australians and Kiwis. I'm all for it.
Yeah, and when Scotland get involved in this, all we do is we end up with like Lyndon Dykes playing up front. Like, we really need to sort this out.
Yeah, but
Australia's Lyndon Dykes.
Yeah. But you could have claimed Trump. That was your mistake.
Then John McGinn would have got that penalty.
There we go. That's the real root. Okay, so Juan, left you kind of to last. I'm sorry for leaving you hanging on for this, but I want to hear about this Colombia story, because I experienced similar things in Brazil. We in Brazil experienced a similar story of contestation over the national team shirt. So what happened in Colombia?
It's the Brazilianization of Colombia. It's really sad because this wasn't the case before. So essentially, Colombia had its presidential elections during the World Cup. And actually,
which is really unserious. I mean, where are your priorities? This is why Colombia got knocked out.
Pretty much, in a way. So, and this is every 4 years, every election coincides pretty much with a World Cup. So you'd think political strategists would have some good ideas around this. But anyway, the election was between the ruling party candidate Iván Cepeda, close ally of President Gustavo Petro, that they're left wing, and the winner, who narrowly won, Abelardo de la Espriella, who I've described as a U.S. asset. Actually, I wrote that I think it's the first time in Colombian and even all of Latin American history that a candidate got elected overtly campaigning that it's like, hey, I'm a foreign agent, pretty much. So this guy, he's a tri-citizen of Italy, the U.S., and Colombia, has not lived in Colombia since 2016. He's a registered Republican in the U.S., and he said this. He said during an interview, "I'm a registered Republican and I voted for President Trump while running for president of Colombia." So it's It's a pretty
on the
wild.
streets of Bogota, they're chanting CIA, CIA.
Yeah, there's a lot of other stuff. Like he like denigrated like Colombian food, saying he preferred like Italian food, and his home in Florence. This guy is really despicable. Yeah, he was an atheist and then turned into this Catholic patriot. So there was this whole like, I've called it patriot washing of this guy. That he's like, like Milei before running for office, he was just this literal godless libertarian globalist, and had to rebrand himself for the presidency. Like he said he found God in 2020 because an aunt of his died from COVID, whatever, and so now he's super Catholic and he likes to speak Latin and whatever. And so part of this is like putting on the Colombian jersey and saying, I am the Colombian nationalist, I am the Colombian patriot. And so his supporters started putting on the jersey as well, similar to like Bolsonarismo and Brazil. And as far as like patriot washing goes, this makes perfect sense. But so what did Cepeda and the Colombian left do? It was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I think it frankly like lost them the election. Cepeda said not only that he would not wear the jersey, he told his supporters not to wear it. The best part about all of this is that Petro in 2022 wore it. He wore it throughout his presidency. He wore it in 2026, and he told his supporters to wear it. So it's just really dumb. I've talked about oikophobia, progressive oikophobia, and that's like hatred of like your own culture or your own nation. And in the Latin American left, we increasingly see like I like to say that like the leftists are like divided between like nationalists and progressives, and there's like a continuum. So like the nationalists would be like Evo Morales, López Obrador, Correa in Ecuador, etc., and the progressives like Boric in Chile. And Petro and Cepeda have like elements of both, and it's funny because like Petro was like is a savvier politician. I mean, he put on the damn jersey. Leftists put on the damn jersey, and so I don't know. Like it's just colossally dumb. The election, the difference between both candidates was 250,000 votes. And frankly, like those losses boil down to relative to Petro, Cepeda lost a lot of support among the Andean working class. And look, like, hey, like a lot of other alienating things that like Petro did and Cepeda as well. Like you could just chalk it up to alienating the middle classes. You know who really cares about putting on the damn jersey? Like working class Colombians. So, like I said, it honestly very conceivably cost them the election.
Insane. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why you would abandon a national symbol like that to your political opponents. It as you say,
to a
happened
foreign
in Brazil.
asset.
To a foreign, especially this guy. Like they could have just called him out on that quite easily.
I will say actually that I think you could plausibly make a case that like Bolsonaro Senior Jair in like 2018, like I can somewhat buy it. The like Bolsonarismo standing against like the NGOs and like Macron telling them what they can
and the right had already adopted it before Bolsonaro came to lead the right. The right on the streets was wearing the jersey from 2014 onwards. So it's
Yeah, so it's more like these things like exist within a continuum and like a transition, and so that's why this is so sad that for me, what Cepeda specifically, because Petro actually did the right thing, but Cepeda should have said, no, we own this jersey. The Colombian people own this jersey. You are not going to steal this from us. You are a goddamn, vende patria de mierda, whatever, sell out to your own country. You are not going to wear this thing. But that's just not what happened, sadly.
Euan.
Yeah, just super quickly. On the Bolsonaro thing, it was a really strange kind of period of using the national symbol as in like the national team jersey, because there was very little connection to football itself. I remember like really vividly doing some pre 2018 election reporting, and you'd go around and there was always this discussion of like everyone wearing the national team football jersey on these right-wing events and rallies and things like that. And it was always like, do we know who the number 10 for the national team is? No. do we know the names of all of the Supreme Court justices and who we're going to put pressure on to, to make sure that, they stop corruption and get rid of the PT? Yes, we know them all. It was really anti-football, in fact. But what I just wanted to jump in and ask Juan quickly is, do we know who the players voted for? Was there any outspoken political guys on the squad?
But
James Rodriguez, for example?
This is the perfect question. There was actually news about this just this weekend. So firstly, like James, who, isn't what he used to be, but, he was really great in the 2014 World Cup. He's like a right winger. And like he famously, this is a scandal. He refused like Pedro sent off the national team, because that's the thing. The first Colombian game was 3 days before the second round vote. And so Pedro sent them off, to go to the game. And James refused to shake his hand. And now over the weekend, Cuadrado, who didn't play actually, but he's a famous big player, and Jerry Mina, who's a defender, he scored a goal I think in the 2018. Actually, I think against England in the 2018 World Cup. So in Colombia is well known. Like you see all these players' faces everywhere on ads for things. And they both called De La Espriella in his home, and they told him, "Oh, Mr. President, we love you. The long dark night is finally over." Keep in mind that both of these players are black, and in Colombia, like Afro-Colombians voted like 90% for Cepeda and Petro, the Department of Chocó, which is like the most Afro-Colombian. All the Pacific Coast is super Afro-Colombian, and it voted by like a margin of like 80-90%. For the left. So this is really shocking. Both of these players, they both like lost family members to the country's armed conflict, and traditionally people from like conflict-ridden areas in Colombia vote for the left. So that was pretty shocking. I've called it negros por vender la patria. Oh, that's another thing. De Las Priella's slogan, part of his patriot washing, is firme por la patria, firm for the homeland. So I've called it firm for selling out the homeland.
Yeah. It's a kind of ridiculous story on the whole, lamentable. Karl.
Yeah, I want to make a broader point about that, because you know that online meme, the Global Latina Belt, which is basically about the similarities between, the Middle East, North Africa, Latin America, and all of that.
There's a BungaCast episode on that specifically, on its way, which I'm delaying getting sorted, but we're gonna do it anyway.
Yeah, if you do it in Spanish, I'll join you. So what I think is, it's kind of like, I wouldn't even call it the global south, because it's a belt. I love that it's a belt, right? And you get this phenomena that are quite similar, which is the cowardice of the left to take control of national symbols. Because if you go far back to 1848, that whole dreaded line the Germans don't sing in their national anthem, Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. It's not some kind of Nazi thing. It's about the kind of, for the first time, it's a collectivist, popular will, and it's about holding that national interest as a representative of the democratic will of the people above all other interests, not against other nations, right? And then what happens today, again, with the wet liberal paradigm, the WLP, what happens is this abandonment of any sense of being able to participate in the national consciences, the national symbols, we not in a sort of, no offense, Euan and Tim, in the kind of Scottish or Catalan patronizing, oh yeah, your nations too, but rather than in that being a real manifestations of the will of the people as a collective, right? And part of that is not being ashamed of being able to display the symbols, and that's across the globe, right? So you look at England, is anyone displaying a flag, is like, that's a right-wing thing. Anybody kind of connecting to a national symbol in any way, but again, because it's associated nationalism in the left, and that's a real crisis. How are you ever going to re-engage in a politics of sovereignty, in a politics of national self-determination, in democratization, in kind of re-establishing the national will, without being kind of in a complete agreement about the fact that you're all contesting within the same political arena. And I think that's where it gets really interesting and goes beyond football. And what you see in Colombia, you can see across the globe, where people are kind of put off, oh yeah, I'm supporting my country, but like not enough to wave the flag, right? And what better opportunity do you have than the World Cup? And then that's something that kind of might sound mundane in any other context, becomes really important, because it's your ability to say, I represent everyone, I speak for everyone, I'm willing to kind of contest that within the paradigm of the collectivity that brings us together, which is the nation. And then you cede the ground to who? The kind of the traitors who are willing to let the imperialist kind of CIA, I'm going back to my loony left days now, kind of agendas, that those become the spokespeople for that national self-determination. And I think that's a really interesting point. And I have a side point to this, which is about why Colombia didn't progress so far in the World Cup. They should have done better. I've had this running joke about Harry Kane, is whenever he played good, I said it's basically because that day Tuchel played the Harry Kane, the Bayern Munich Harry Kane. And whenever he didn't do well, like the last game, is he forgot and he brought the Spurs Harry Kane. And I think the problem that happened with you is instead of getting the Bayern Munich Luis Diaz, you got the Liverpool underslot Luis Diaz.
Yeah,
totally,
absolutely.
Totally.
Juan, do you want the last point?
Yeah. I just wanted to add something I forgot to say earlier, like, and also what like Karl said, like, with Bolsonarismo, like I said, like I can see a case for it being like a legitimate like nationalist movement and like its origins to some extent. But it's funny because now like it's just completely the reverse. I mean, like in Colombia, like De La Espriella supporters, they'll wave like Israeli and U.S. flags. Same thing with like Bolsonarismo, and it's like, dude, this is you guys are not actually nationalists. You hate your own countries. Like it's just completely bogus. And yeah, like Flavio Bolsonaro going to the White House and Eduardo too to lobby for sanctions and with terrorist designations and all of the like. But I mean, yeah, you just cannot cede national symbols to these people. And there's a better way to do this. Look at the Mexican left. I mean, Claudia Sheinbaum, it's funny. She's like hypnotized progressives around the world because of her identity. First female Jewish climate scientist president of Mexico. You look at what she actually does, and she actually knows what she's doing and is very pragmatic. So as a host of the World Cup, what did she do? Her inaugural ticket, she donated it to this indigenous woman from Veracruz and just watched the inaugural game in this working class neighborhood of Mexico City. This is smart on multiple levels. I mean, as we were talking about in the intro, the kind of people who will go to these games are very affluent. And in Mexico, this means you're going to support the opposition. And yeah, I saw some clips that in like the inaugural games, some of the supporters were yelling, yeah, like "Fuera Morena, out, Morena, the governing party, out." So, well, she avoided that and happily stuck it out with her supporters among the people in Mexico who obviously can't afford to go to any of the games. And guess what she did? She put on Mexico's gorgeous, I think it's the coolest of all the jerseys. That amazing,
Absolutely.
like it has the Aztec calendar on it, all the pattern designs over it. It's awesome. She put it on. Girl boss climate scientist put it on. I applaud you, Claudia.
All right, well, we've done an excellent job here of keeping the politics out of the football, not making any kind of outrageous claims of bias from the authorities and so on. So we've all been very very serious and mature here. And as a way to round this out, I think we have to make some very serious and mature predictions. Someone's already noted that this is the first time the World Cup semifinalists are the places 1, 2, 3, and 4 in FIFA's very august and treated seriously world rankings. So let's do this. Lots of surprises in the early rounds. Some minnows overperformed. Now it's back to the kind of scheduled programming as FIFA wants it. All the big boys there in the last stages of it. So give me your finalists. Give me the winner. And give me the third place team as well, because everybody loves that third place match. This is what the real football perverts tune in for. I'll start with Juan.
France. It's going to be France. They're too disgusting. I don't see a way to stop them. I mean, anything can happen. Chance is such a big factor. Any of them could theoretically win, but the smart money is on France.
Against?
Second or third, I have no idea.
Tim?
France, Argentina, France to win.
And third place, we need to know whether it's going to be Spain or England in the third.
I've just got this. I don't really. The one prediction I'd like to make, or I don't know if it's just it's just for Dan Burn to be sent off. I just thought maybe
for being too tall.
I don't know. No, I just kind of doing his funny dance and then knocking someone. Just whatever it is, just being Dan Burn. I don't know if it's a prediction or just a sincere wish, but yeah, no. I mean, maybe England make it to the final. Maybe it's the French that beat them. It's the toss-up. Yeah, we're just thinking about who beats the English, and probably Argentina, maybe the French.
Euan?
I mean, predictions as in what we think is going to happen, not what we want to happen. I think that...
Yeah, I mean, Tim has an is-ought distinction problem. He's not really able to distinguish the two.
I mean, like, super briefly, Argentina have only played, I think, since the France final in 2022, I think the only European team they've actually played before Switzerland was Iceland in a friendly. They don't know how to play against these big teams. They haven't played in ages. They've avoided them for the longest time, so they didn't have to get beat during the messy parade. There's every chance, because I think they still do want it more than England because it's such a massive fixture, but there's every chance they could get a real hiding in that game and could be France-England final, France to take it, Argentina to win third place.
Karl?
Yeah, I think England is going to beat Argentina. And I want to say, before I move on, you mentioned that it's now all the big boys left. It's the big boys and Lionel Messi. And pause for comic effect. I think England is going to beat Argentina. Still trying to visualize how they can be. I'm sure France is going to beat Spain. I'm not quite sure how England can beat France. I mean, France have been just out of this world. And I really want England to win, but I think it's going to be France. And then hopefully Spain will trounce Argentina and then not just defeat them, say you can't claim your Spanish passports, because that's what Argentinians do. They go back like, this is how much they're disconnected from the continent. Any chance they have to claim their Spanish passports from 500 years ago, they would do it. And they're going to trounce them and say, you're not even eligible for Spanish passports.
Is it too late for Trump to bring back, or for Infantino to bring back Balogun just for the final? Just like the two teams play and Balogun just hangs out.
That's how you win. That's the prize.
Yeah, and he plays one half with each team.
Very good. I'm saying, similar to you, and I think Argentina are a pure vibes-based team. They feel to me like Brazil 2014, where the first good team they'll come up against, they'll get destroyed because they are an utterly unserious side and feel like they can just vibes their way to the final and to the victory like they did last time round. They won't do it this time round. The only problem is that England are cowards and won't really push at that weakness. So England will win 2-0 when really they should be beating Argentina 5-0. On the other side, Spain are going to bore everyone to death. And it'll be the worst semi-final of all time, but Spain will win 1-0 in added time, and we'll have an England-Spain final. And just to correct for the terrible Scottish bias on this podcast, 2 Scottish representatives, I'm going to say England are going to be world champions, and people are going to feel kind of odd about that, but don't worry, you'll feel even worse when Trump's dancing with them on stage, and at that point we'll switch off and never think about it again until 4 years from now. Thank you, Euan, Karl, Juan, Tim. This has been BungaCast World Cup 2026 podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it, or maybe you're shouting at us like, get back to the politics, stay out of football, in which case we'll be back with a regular programming next week. Thank you for listening. Catch you later. Bye-bye.